So good to see you. Looking really good,
Thank
I must
you,
say.
thank
You
you.
look like a senator to me.
Oh, good.
In the audience, welcome very, very much to Conversation. A great personal delight to welcome to the program a dear friend of mine and of the world's for a very long time, and that is Colia Clark. And Colia Clark is one of our own here at MNN, and she's also now, as you will be hearing and we'll be talking about, she's a candidate for the United States Senate from the great state of New York on the Green Party, and that election's coming up on the 2nd of November, and Colia Clark, welcome so very, very much once again to Conversation, and congratulations on the candidacy.
Thank you, Harold. It's always wonderful coming to MNN and being here with you. I don't know a greater person as a producer than you are. You have done just terrific work, and that's good for me.
Well,
yes, I'm running for the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, let's share a little bit. We're going to go there. We had a clip and that sort of thing. Okay, yeah, congratulations. That's really
Thank
wonderful, and we want to do that. But a little of your background. Could you do that
Well, you know,
for me?
I've come up out of these.
The past, but yeah.
I've come up out of many things. I'm out of a farm labor family.
Yeah.
In the early days of my life, and of course, I grew up in urban Jackson, Mississippi, deep south.
Yeah.
But I grew up between Jackson, Mississippi, and the Mississippi Delta. My parents were what might be called migrant workers. Every late summer, early fall, we were in the Delta picking cotton.
Hard work.
There. Well, I loved it though.
You
Picking
did?
cotton
Okay.
wasn't the problem. The problem was having owners who did not want to pay or did not want to put you into decent housing. The problem was obviously the racism, the intense racism,
right.
and the schizophrenic character of Mississippi.
It must have been. How you could bear up under that, I don't know, because I'm so fortunate in being a WASP. It's so easy, but to have had to put up with that nonsense.
Well, WASP in Mississippi didn't necessarily escape some of that nonsense if they were poor. You know, we get this. We get this picture of just blacks being abused. But if blacks were not allowed to sit at the front of the bus, whites were not allowed to sit at the back. So we need to begin to.
I don't understand what you just said.
If blacks are not allowed to sit at the front, whites are not allowed to sit at the back.
What do you mean?
It is a violation for any white.
I see
so
both
the
ways.
rules work both ways, and it works for all within the system. It has since slavery begun in the United States.
I know.
So the laws that apply to the lesser also apply to the greater.
So the interests, the understanding of the human condition under terms of class and economic comfort and so forth is really crucial.
Yes, very crucial to understand, especially if we want to take a true look at the Deep South.
Yeah, right.
But do understand that the most oppressed groups are blacks and red and brown, if we want to call Mexicans brown, in the Deep South. And yellow in this case in Mississippi, if we want to label people by those ugly names like yellows and blacks and reds and browns. And that would be the Chinese who came in the 1840s building the railroad.
Yeah, they were treated, it was horrible. Did you ever see I read the thing, Cecil Rhodes, I read his autobiography one time. Horrible. And the racism that was in the 19th century was so intense and so focused. It's hard to know how the hell we've ever been able to get up the whole Mount Sisyphus to where we are now.
Yes, but in the Delta of Mississippi, that group is a part of the population. You'll never see them in film. They're never talked about. But the Chinese, like the indigenous people, are there. And the Chinese have been there since the 1840s. Of course, indigenous people have been there forever. And the Mexicans are really what we call Mexican, not just indigenous people who have been coming through there forever. So I grew up in this environment of racial oppression and hatred, but on the other hand,
this is pre-Martin King,
long before Martin King,
62, and all back when it was in full flower, and then you could trace that back too, because I've seen you refer to. I'm not sure the year, but we used to. And the law is a thing that's really trying to understand, because you can live. Winston Churchill once said the law can be an ass.
Yes,
it can. It was in the times of this country. We had the Fugitive Slave Act.
That's right.
We had chattel slavery.
That's correct.
And we had the Fugitive Slave Act, and you were a good citizen if a slave got on the Freedom Train up north or wherever they were going, and you captured them and you turned them back in. You were a law-abiding citizen for turning that black person back into shackles. I mean, what kind of a country is that had such a system, or how do we live with such a past of injustice so ingrained?
We must understand that there's always been a marriage between northern corporate and slave owners, and Southern slave owners. Southerners were primarily the plantation system. The North also had 32,000 slaves, for example, in the Hudson Valley.
What do you mean, slaves?
Slaves in our New York State.
Are you talking over the whole colony?
I'm talking about New York State.
Yeah, but it's slaves.
Slaves. 32,000 slaves resided in the Hudson Valley.
What year are we talking?
We're talking about from 1624 forward. The first slaves arrived here, 10 Africans arrived here in 1624.
You said white slaves.
I'm talking about black slaves.
You're talking about black slaves in the North.
In the North.
Okay.
All of the Northern. Well, just Maine was not. Maine was old New York, but Maine was not a slave state.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, New York is a slave state. It's the largest of the northern slaveholding states.
So slavery was in flower in New York at that time. Chattel slavery.
Chattel slavery. Chattel slavery began
racial?
Here
was it racial?
Into 1624, 1797. Certainly it was racial. 1797, slavery gets like a protracted ending. New York kind of worked out a system where if you were born in 1797, you were free, but you were born to slave parent. If you were a black female in 1825, you could become free. And if you were a black male, you would not be free until 1827, which allowed the North, I'm saying these lies and stuff we need to deal with because the North got a chance, the winner gets a chance to decide how the story is told.
The winners write the history, don't they?
That's right. Yeah. And so we don't talk about this period when New York is trying to sell off their slaves. So you sell off your slaves. You're trying to get them into either the South or into Brazil, where we were always sent if we acted up. When Africans revolted, we would be sent to other parts of the Western world, Western Hemisphere.
Like
I don't
cattle.
know. No
like
different.
No different. Like the cattle call it.
No different, because you didn't want to lose the value on this human being.
Yeah, that's right.
So therefore, you sold them to Jamaica, somewhere in the West Indian Islands, or Brazil, or Colombia, wherever.
And that goes back into when you had the feudal system in Europe. A duke would have an estate.
Yes.
And he would have, as part of that estate, the land and everything. Then he'd have so many cows, so many chickens, so many goats, and so many serfs.
And so many serfs.
And he would lose it in a crap game, and the goats, chickens, and everything went, along with the serfs, went to the other person.
That's right.
You know, it's hard to imagine.
It was the same system implemented here.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's naming a thing.
Yeah.
But the forms remain the same. The substance remains the same.
Yeah.
So if you looked at
and it
cell
remains
curve,
to this day, in a way. Maybe it's modulated.
There's no question about it. We really have to work on the law in this country to give it meaning. The 60s begun that process with Dr. King being able to begin to give meaning to the Declaration of Independence, meaning to these preambles to the Constitution. But we need to begin to, as Americans, face reality. Because if we look at the two systems, which were clearly defined by the Kerner Commission report, and I know you remember Kerner, Governor Kerner's commission was set up by Lyndon Johnson, immediately following.
There were some good things going on in the 60s. The Voter Rights Act, kind of
voter rights, and
then it got all subterfuge and sunk by the Vietnam War. For one thing.
Well, the war was a part of it, but remember the civil rights movement. Dr. King is dead because we became a part.
You worked with him, didn't you?
Because, yes.
Yeah.
But I was not on his staff. My husband, my first and second husband, both were on his staff.
On his staff, right.
But,
and I know you worked with Stokely.
Of course I did.
God bless
He's my
Stokely.
man.
I loved him fiercely.
Couldn't have found me. Oh, I love it.
I mean, committed, but also really funny and bright. Really
wonderful man. Wonderful, brilliant.
Yeah.
But
you told me about hiding under a bridge or something like that and laughing.
We were hiding under the bridge. Let me tell this story. But let me get the King story out here.
Okay.
Dr. King coming onto the stage, and then we looked at his death. At his death, whether the government killed him or he was killed by some private interest, at his death, more than 325 cities burned in this country. Cities and towns. And it is this burning, this mass uprising that's often seen as black, which is also a lie, because if you look at Chicago, you got 12 blocks burning in what we call Appalachia, or the near north side, of whites. What year is that? This is 1968.
68, was that the convention? Was that at the convention, too? The Yippies and whatnot came.
Yeah, that would be later that summer.
Be later that year,
when we're looking at the at the coming together of people for the first time because of the Poor People's Campaign, all the things that he had done. But Lyndon Johnson appointed Colonel of Illinois to head up a commission to look at the riots, to look at this racial, what was seen as a racial outburst, but really was an outburst of the American people, showing their dissatisfaction, showing their love for a man whose life had been taken, showing their love for a movement. And so what that commission said that is urgent that we look at is that America had two nations, one black, one white, one rich, one poor.
And the blacks were rich, right?
And the blacks were poor.
Making a joke.
And the whites, I know, the whites were very rich, but we're not talking about rich among whites.
And we used to, back in the colonial, we had indentured slavery also. We had indentured people
servants.
Were servants, but they were like slavery, and they were in bondage.
That was no different than, if you look at the transfer of British common law onto the American scene, and you go back and you really go to pull it up, nobody talks about it. 1631 is the first Fugitive Slave Act.
Was it really?
1631, but it's not in the South.
Yeah,
it's in Delaware.
Delaware, where that lady just won,
Yes, and the next one will be, next Fugitive Slave Act will be in Virginia in 1632 or thereabout.
Okay.
But we don't talk about that, but this is a hidden history
I think
of this
we
country.
should talk about it, don't you?
We need to talk about it because
of a grounding of injustice.
I would like to, as a senator, to begin to say that we could figure out ways to develop legislation that would force the nation, one, to rewrite its history, to write an inclusive history that would be spread among our young, so that our young at least can be more intelligent than we were. And in telling the history, we began to see the maltreatment of all of its citizens. That does not mean that blacks and reds were not damned to hell, but it does mean that we look at the evolution of a system where blacks and whites started out pretty much hanging together. You would pick up fugitive slaves running off together, but they weren't fugitive slaves. They were blacks and Germans and Celts and Irish and Scot, and basically not Irish, most Scots and Welsh, all running off together. They would be captured 8 or 10, but blacks would always receive the most stringent punishment, where the Scot or the Welsh might be given a lifetime indenture. Now, what's a lifetime indenture if it's not
like
slavery?
To me,
it's slavery. The black might be destroyed.
And a slaveholder had to at least provide some sort of place for the person to sleep or something. And somebody said they get people freed up north, and what they were free to do was starve.
That's correct.
Because there was nobody had any obligation to take care of them, even like they had an obligation to take care of the ox or the cow.
Yeah, New York is a state where where legally you can look at the law in New York State when slavery finally ends in the law, and I did say in the law in 1827, because you can see instances. You can see instances that slavery continues. I lived in a house at Selkirk, New York, which was built in 1731.
Wow, that's way back.
The slave was born there named Caesar, an African born there in 1732.
Okay.
He was the longest living recorded African in the enslavement. He died there in around 1751, 1752. Over 117 years. But he went through 3 sets of masters, 3 generations of them. And the first one is obviously chattel slavery. The second one, he's a little older and he's taken care of. The next, and for some reason, this particular set of Europeans the men had some physical issues that went from generation to generation. So he takes care of the second set. But Caesar gets a chance to live through segregation. When New York is trying to, is saying, and Harriet Tubman has built the home for the seniors up at Auburn, New York. New York goes through this in the law, where the struggle is that you must take care of these Africans you couldn't sell, old folk.
Social Security. The old cow.
So Caesar,
it's so absurd.
They segregate this little small match. It's about 18, 20 rooms. And they segregate it. And Caesar actually gets the kitchen area. So Caesar has the power. The old Dutch oven. So Caesar was the Dutch, of course, of this Albany, Selkirk region. So Caesar gets the kitchen area, and Caesar therefore takes on power because he controls the oven. The oven was really very popular for great breads. And it's still there, and that's
warmth in the winter.
Obviously it's a federal landmark. It's still there. And when I do travel courses with students, I take them to the house at Selkirk.
You do that, do you?
Yes,
good for you. Do you do that?
In a while now, about 10 years. But yes, of course. The best way to study history in this country is through travel courses and taking young people into the experiences, integrating those experiences to where we are now. And graveyards, I love graveyards. You
yeah, they got one downtown here in Manhattan, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We have all over all over this. So Staten Island has the oldest, actually urban center. What could be called an urban center is out of Staten Island. I haven't looked at this information in years. But New York City is a major slave area for New York State, except unlike Albany, Schenectady, Troy, Hudson, the Catskill area, you're not talking about large slaveholders. You're talking about one person usually to a household. Because the city could not accompany large groups of Africans in a household.
I have a feeling that slavery in the North America had the worst effect of most anywhere else in the Americas, possibly. I'm not sure if I'm right about that.
I don't know about that, because when I look at the refusal of folk, especially in Central and South America, to adapt to African, but they may have the culture, but the adaptation of calling yourself by your colonizer's name, we don't do that in America. So maybe there was something.
I think, in a certain sense, I think it was the oppression was worse.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because your mind is captured.
In the Caribbean or in Brazil,
we can say it's worse, but when you begin to look at the political quality of what happens, I can say that the African in the United States did go through worse.
That's what I'm saying, and the scars physically, and those are scars.
Not just scars. These are eternal.
Scars,
for all of us, eternal.
Yes, absolutely.
But but the things that we're not looking at is that we don't have our names in any of the cultures. That's Central or South America or the United States.
Santeria. I mean, the Yoruba.
We all kept that. We all kept our religion there.
Yeah, right.
But we had to hide it.
Yeah,
we had to hide it there too.
Yeah.
So we don't have the African art forms and African cultural forms that we have maintained are fragments of what we were. But our names, our religion is not, in fact,
they wanted
recognized. We have been forced to adapt to the colonizer's vision of who we were.
That's right, and lose your identity.
That's right.
That's what I wanted to do.
And that's what I'm arguing. And so when people go to saying, that the African in the United States was worse off, we all have the same outcome. So I'm not sure about that.
The idea of an oppressor wanting to have the oppressed have no sense of their own individual identity is one of the worst things that can happen, and is one of the worst things that happen when they've got such overwhelming power. They just lose their identity and they lose their sense of
that's right, and it's only in the Western slavery that we get this. Because we've had these run-ins over the last 6,000 years that we can document. That Africa's been invaded all the time. I mean, the Assyrians or the Persians. You can come right on down to the Greeks, the Romans.
I know.
Just name them. There are always these invasions, but usually groups come in and they come for something. They come and they will, like the Greeks will come and they will label everything after the Greeks, but they adapt in the culture of the society they have colonized. They don't come in and, the Greeks did a lot of smashing too, and the Romans too, but not in the same way.
Not in the same way.
They come to adapt. They don't say to the people that you now are nobody.
Right.
That you're not human.
Cut your deliberately cut any sense of identity or roots.
That you may not have your name.
Right.
You may not have anything about you.
So degrading.
It is.
It's at a very deep level.
Yeah, it's the Western imperialism. That we had Western European
imperialism. Which still
ruins
the world.
And it still rules the world.
It still rules the world.
That's because we, as I understand it, did the same thing across the world. Well, the Russians had cross-continental imperialism. The Europeans have had worldwide imperialism. So you can look at each one of them and you can identify them. Go down to Beaufort Islands, you can just about every one of the European slave states have an island down there.
And the colonial imperialism, or the Western American-led, maybe, imperialism. We got troops in every damn country in the world, practically, and we're surrounding so many of the people. We're invading countries, killing them in order to have them, and then we're presenting ourselves as having a model that is relevant to all the world. They should adopt to. A lot of running dog administrations will go along with our example or something, but our example that we're presenting as one that's relative to the whole world is really inadequate to what the future requires. So I think, do you think we're coming to the end of the imperialism of the American era?
I don't know what that is going to depend on us. When I go to Washington, one of the things that
we got to talk about the
I'm going to talk about this.
Okay, good.
When I go to Washington, one of the things I'm proposing, and I will be backing any group of senators or congressmen that bring it forward, is that we, one, end all the wars. All the foreign wars must come to an end, because the foreign wars have set us up potentially for being invaded by the whole darn world in one way or the other. We think that our isolation protects us, but not necessarily. That even our relationship with Europe will depend on our ability to continue to feed them economically. Can we? We can't feed ourselves economically.
I know.
So the whole imperial system, as we know it, is at risk, but America is at great risk. We must bring the troops home. All troops must be brought home. We must end the Iraq war, so that we would not talk about leaving 50,000 men behind. No men left behind, no administrators left behind, no women left behind. Everybody must be returned home and reintegrated.
But they can't be returned home because they have not yet learned the lessons we're to learn them about. They should lose their own identity and become our chattel, a puppet representative. They're not ready yet.
We're going to have to build the peace whether we're ready or not. We must bring our troops home, reintegrate those injured men and women, injured psychologically, injured physically in many cases, bring them home and prepare to take care of them as they are human beings. They went out not because they wanted to go. They went because we sent them into illegal wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan.
I couldn't agree with you
and
more.
In the interim, we have built a war in Pakistan. We're trying to build a war in Iran that's affecting India. We must bring them home. So I'm proposing that we do that immediately.
Well, that's a big. Have you studied carefully? I suppose you would. You're suggesting yourself for a very responsible role in American society. Have you studied the budget and how much of it is taken over by the military?
Look, more than $705 million, $735 million. We are proposing for next year's military Department of Defense budget. That is the defense budget. Remember, when you look at the defense budget, you got to see defense. Then you got an expenditure budget that could be from $100 billion to $300 billion
That's
annually.
Still military
This is all under the Defense Department. We don't know what that.
We got a lot of stuff.
We don't know what those expenditures are.
We got a lot of private subcontractors, like mercenaries that are in the private sector.
They are mercenaries.
That's part of it.
Because our military really has been, for the most part, Harold, if we look at it, since Germany. Since Germany.
Since Germany. What do you mean Germany?
Since World War II.
Oh, okay.
Yes, since the end of World War II. I could say since Japan's bombing. But if we look at our military, these men and women, that's why we spread them across the world, because they're there, men in the first part, now women too, they are there really to protect corporate interests who are in these areas, taking the resources and developing whatever they're going to develop in terms of plants and companies in other lands, whether it's oil, whether we're talking about mining of this or that, whether we're talking about setting up wholesale retail markets. We are taking over, and we are there protecting these interests. We are not there because we really need to be there.
And now those people that are doing that, could that be, can you see a world? We don't want a world
I think we ought to tax those war profiteers, tax them over and over and over again, because they're out to murder, and the only way we're going to get them to begin to rethink the war industry in this country is that we talk about that. Do you know they don't pay taxes?
Who don't?
Blackwater doesn't pay the taxes.
Blackwater doesn't.
None of these agencies. Halliburton, just go to name them. They don't pay taxes. They go to the Defense Department, which does not have an open bidding system. It's as un-American as you can think. You're talking about un-American? There's no bidding system in the Defense Department. You go there and they work out whatever the deals are. The deals are worked out.
They're not making a comparison between company A, company B offers so they can make the best deal or any of that kind of thing.
It's open bidding. It's open. You don't. There's no.
Do you have an idea of how much on the defense?
So we got to end that. That's we got to close.
And that's
we must close that.
That is Unit 1 in your campaign platform.
You better believe it. All of the defense piece. I mean, I am saying clearly that the American people must demand a 15% surcharge on all war profiteering industries. That the American people must end war profiteering in those industries that are out developing implements of war.
Well, we're the largest
technology for war.
Yeah, the technology and the weapon system. We're on the leading edge of that, I think.
That's right. We not only supply ourselves, we supply the world.
And we supply to Colombia and other countries so that they can oppress their people largely.
That's correct.
Because the people all over the world are being oppressed by a small class of people that are claiming the right to run everything because they have a plutocratic view of the world with them at the top.
That's right. So we have got to tax these folks. These folks must not want, first of all, pay their annual taxes. And we must add a surtax of 15% so that we can help to build our budgets. We need to talk about peacetime economy. And these people are going to be there, so they must be taxed.
How the hell can we have a peacetime when we got soldiers all over the world?
No, they must come home here. We got to close the 752 military bases abroad.
How many?
You know, 752. And we still have, to this hour, bases in Korea, bases in Japan. Why?
No, I'm asking you now.
Because I can't, there's no way we can justify this.
What's the rationale for that? What is the rationale?
The only thing that I can see is our very presence becomes a part of the economy of these nations.
Right.
That's the only thing I can see.
Of those nations and our own.
Because
of Daddy Warbucks. Remember the comic books with Daddy Warbucks and Little Orphan Annie and whatnot? Daddy Warbucks. Do you have an idea of what the percentage of, I don't know how you do it, gross domestic product or whatever, is the defense
23% of our budget is the Defense Department.
Yeah.
That's just the Defense Department. Now, but remember, the Veterans Administration does not fit under that.
Okay.
Those men that come back and like everybody else into the various social services systems won't fit under that.
Okay.
That is the defense budget. The defense budget is separate and apart.
Yeah, but what about all these other things like Blackwater, all these things that are quasi or contractual or mercenary?
Those are the contracts that I'm talking about. Those are the war industries.
All right, the war industries, and you said profiteers. That's a loaded term and everything.
I loaded it because that's what they're doing. They're
load away, as far as I'm concerned, but I understand. But what I'm saying, if you take it all and you get something that the amount of the gross domestic product that is defense with all of the other sub-things other than just the Defense Department, do we have an idea what percentage of GDP that is? And do we have an understanding of the trend in that relationship of the percentage of the GDP of the United States budget is given over to military questions? Or do you have that happen?
I really don't.
It'd be good to have those
those who all get 50% plus.
You think so?
But I would have to.
50%.
I would have to when you really add up the things.
Because you say 23 is the
23% is actually the percentage of the national budget that is the Defense Department.
Okay, now that's creating jobs for people to make all those machine guns and Gatling guns and M16s and all that kind of stuff. So the senator in that state or the House of Representatives got a factory and somebody's going to get a job making those weapons, so it's part of the economy.
That's correct.
It's like Killingree is part of the means by which the economy keeps going. Some people say we only got out of the Great Depression when we got into the Second World War.
Yeah, that's an argument.
We can't have a system of economics or capital formation, distribution of demand and capability to where we can actually be serving the needs of people because we have an inadequate underpinning to our philosophy of organizing our society economically and politically.
I would agree with you. It's a philosophy of how we organize the society. And that is the thinking that we must challenge.
And that's what you're bringing to your campaign.
You better believe it.
With Howie, what's his name?
Howie Hawkins is running for governor.
Good guy, and you got a good lot of other people.
He's the best possible candidate.
Yeah, maybe you could lay it out. There's other candidates too. There's comptroller.
No. We have Howie Hawkins that's running for governor, and then we have Julia Wildebrand. And if you talk with Julia, you must get her on your show. You've got to have her.
Tell me, give me her number.
She is absolutely the most wonderful woman you want to meet.
Okay, put me in touch.
She's not only skilled, a PhD.
You're going to put me in touch.
I'm going to set her up with you.
I want the number on my desk by tomorrow, young lady.
You'll get it. You'll get it in your mail tonight. If she hadn't already jumped there.
Now that's what I like to hear. Yeah.
But she really defines the meaning of that comptroller's office and the power of that office, because I thought the comptroller was just a person who just did the budget stuff.
Accounting, yeah.
No. Actually, it's probably the most powerful, as powerful as the governor.
Okay, yeah.
And Julia Wildebrand is running for comptroller.
Okay.
And then we have Gloria Matera, who's running really on the ticket with Howie Hawkins as lieutenant governor. But then we have a powerful sister who is looking at the whole question of the abuse of our natural resources, hydrofracking. She's looking at the energy questions.
You know, I hear
she's running for senator, a black woman out of upstate New York.
God bless her. I hear tell they've been able to put a ban on the fracking in the water supply of New York City.
Yes,
Dave Shannon and my friends were up there. They were complaining about that
about a month ago,
and they got that passed. That's good.
That's excellent.
They got to protect the water system and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's protecting the water system. And also it's protecting the land. It's protecting both the water and the land. Because
and that was a lot of reaction by people who were just sort of set up. They could be manipulated because a lot of people, now we got an economic meltdown and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people are vulnerable if you're going to pay somebody. And it's all a bribery thing that they do with the few people who own everything. It's not a just system. I saw Mr. Carter, President Carter, not too long on television, somebody asked, is it or has it ever been, is the system, the national and the world system, is it just? And he said, of course not.
I like Carter.
I do too.
He's become a very honest man.
Yeah.
A very honest man.
He's calling it the way it is, particularly after he's...
I didn't like him when he was in office because I didn't understand it. But
well,
now that I see him across time,
and
to look at some of the stuff that has come from
But to say we live in a world and to accept that it has not been, is not, and the trend is not toward it doesn't bend toward justice.
Toward human justice. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, there's something wrong with that political arrangement, don't you think?
Well, it's not just something wrong with it. Yeah. Dr. King was right. The arc of the universe is long. But at some point, it's going to flip toward justice.
That's like that
long... The question is, what happens in that interim when it begins to flip?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know that I want to be standing anywhere nearby because, you know, what goes up does come down.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a long...
The dialectics will hold.
Do you remember the song? It's a long trail a-winding up Mount Sisyphus, my dear. I'm not sure they did that, but there ought to be. But it's been a hard struggle, and it's not just. And the trending isn't. You know, it isn't there. We don't have vision in the leadership, and so that's why you've got the Green Party and others are, in a certain sense, at a fundamental level, able to address larger issues that might be just things to be manipulated within the political process of winning votes here and there or buying, like the normal political process.
Not just winning votes. We're trying to say to the American people that fundamentally, the two-party system in this country has not served the people.
Or the system.
Well, the system itself, I would agree with that.
Okay.
But it has not served the people. It's supposed to be a we the people. We're supposed to be a we the people.
It's inadequate to what the future requires.
And was inadequate to what the past required.
Oh, well, yeah.
That's why we're in the rut we're in today.
Yeah.
So as I go into the Congress, I'm looking at talking about education. And, you know, we've been hearing people talking about sustainable this and sustainable that, but we have not built a sustainable education curriculum. We have become consumers, by and large, in this country. We don't know how to grow anything and produce anything. So
we can't feed everything.
We cannot feed, clothes, or house ourselves. And there is the outsourcing. We could, in New York State, become the most productive state in the country by, one, making sure that our youth have training, not just in the liberal arts and the sciences and in business and in the arts and in sports, which we must keep in school, the arts and the sports, but also in agriculture, so that our youth, our schools have components, whether they're rural or urban, have an agricultural component where our youth, all youth, learn to do basic, whether it's urban gardening or whether we're talking about acquiring land, and all that empty land that I see, that empty farmland, wasted farmland, our youth could be on there. That is not just to train them in the skills and the technology of agriculture, but also it will provide jobs. Because we begin to talk about building the jobs within agriculture because it's covers about every area of life. It is an economics that covers life. So youth would be looking at housing construction. Youth would be looking at roads and bridges. Youth would be looking at water development. And more importantly, when we go to talk about solar systems, there are solar panels that you can put on the side of a building that would serve many, many towns. So youth could be doing those kind of things. So what I'm proposing, what the Green Party is proposing, is a New Deal. And I like the concept of a New Deal. But blacks were cut out of the New Deal, so I'm proposing a Marshall Plan.
Thank you.
Along the line of that, which we...
Randall Robinson...
but I abandon what's been said, and I like what Randall was saying, too.
Randall Robinson was for reparations.
We've got to have a Marshall Plan. We've got to have reparations for Africans. But right now, let's talk about a Marshall Plan that looks at infrastructure development, that puts our people to work in New York State, not the game that you're going to go out and you're going to develop a $50 billion package that one that Obama is offering that will serve certain unions. And those unions are basically unions that black folk, brown folk, and red folk, and yellow folk, and poor white folk cannot get in.
Did you hear what they've been doing with the black farmers? It's all over the news now. They've been treated horribly. The black farmers are going down, and
I'm one of them.
They've made legislation, and they're just holding up. They're not passing.
They passed it, but they're refusing. It's been approved by the courts, but the Congress is refusing to move on it.
Because because they
and as a soybean farmer in the state of Mississippi in the 80s, I can tell you we could not get loans. My husband, a chemist, a noted chemist, went to get a loan at the bank, and the most we could get was $8,000.
Wow, we're not going to get too much for that.
Our neighbor across the street,
white
male, of course, all around. We were surrounded by whites. You know, it wasn't even Robert, what you gonna do with $8,000? Hell, I can't even survive on $150,000. Right. And at that time, things were hard because the farmers had been hit, and they were trying to figure out how to force the government to let them trade with Russia, grains with Russia, and so forth. But what I'm saying is, no, my mother and father could not get loans. My mother, who came to Jackson, Mississippi in '44, set up her egg business. So we had 500 chicken running around the yard. 500?
Were they running around the yard? They weren't locked up in cages.
Oh, no, you didn't do that.
Did you ever go to a place where they
fenced, yes, but not caged.
Colia, you get to be a senator, you can have some effect, where they put the chickens in cages?
Oh, no, I don't want to even see it. I grew up in Mississippi.
It's unconscionable.
It's unconscionable, but I grew up in Mississippi, at Pelahatchie, Mississippi, and other places. We're a chicken farm state, too. It's horrible, not only what they do to the chicken, but what they do to the human beings who they're forced
that's an extension of it.
Oh, my God, it's horrible. The workers get nothing. The workers are treated like living dogs. And they don't get some improvement across time, but not much.
And then they come along, and it was after the Second World War, there was a chance in this country, we were the winner and all of that, and we had the Marshall, and then the average citizen was able to finally, because the wealth is so concentrated in such a small plutocratic group of people who have all the wealth, we're all like sort of serfs on their estates of various institutions that they set up and
That's
so
right,
forth.
whether it be business or land.
And the people had no way of having any access to credit. Now, those people that already have a big leg up and a big portfolio and everything, they've got collateral, they can get credit to invest in, let's say, a factory that's going to pay for itself in 5 years or something, and then throw off profit and everything in the normal marketplace, or unless it would be a bad business thing. But the credit has not been able to get available to the people, and anybody who's tried to do anything, like a farmer or anything, you got to have credit in order to make an investment, and you have to be not linked only to your past savings, like Scrooge McDuck, that has a whole, they've got a lot of past savings, a lot of advantages coming out of history in that, but it has to be linked into the earnings of the thing in the future that makes it possible for you to get credit to buy assets that are going to pay for themselves. And the only thing they were able to ever get was a home. They could get a home, and it was for about 50 years, the home value was appreciating steady as a rock.
That's right.
And so that was the way some people, the normal people, had a little chance to get in on the capital ownership of assets that made it possible for them to build up a little bit of what would be called net worth. And then that went into crop
by 80 it was already getting the recession that's began to hit.
And then the subprime and that. And they did that. But the point being is the whole system is geared to have a few people own all the assets. Everybody else only has a job on masses estate.
That's right.
The plutocrats own the institutions, the factories, the institutions, and then the people, 90% of the population, 95%, it's all owned by 5% of the population in any real term. 95% of the people only have what they call a job on masses estate to maybe get some money. Now they're going over to China and paying 30 cents an hour and violating all environmental rights, and they can do it with the transportation and containerization. So they've undercut that. So we're like serfs on a feudal estate.
And we look at it.
It should be questioned.
But not just questioned. We as a people in the United States must get some backbone. If we want change, and we know how to make change in this country.
Do we?
It's not, the elections is one way of making doing it. But we also know how to begin to call on our legislators and force them to do what we want them to do.
If you get to be the senator, am I going to give you a call, or are you just going to
have
a big army?
But I won't allow Wall Street to walk in the door.
Well, what about me? Well, I walk in the door.
You can walk in the door, but Wall Street will walk in and do what they did with Obama, walk up asking for some credit, and the man had almost $1 trillion in his hand. And they would say, oh, man, look at this.
Best
money. out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Best democracy.
But it was our money.
Yeah.
And we don't know where they invested it. Some say they've invested it back into whatever, government bonds. I don't know where they invested it, but we want to know where they invested because the people now want a part of Wall Street. We want transparency, and we want 50% ownership on every dollar.
Do you like some of the things that Mr. Obama's been able to get through? Health care?
Well, it's a weak bill, but it's a health care bill.
Yeah, it's really hard because it's hard to imagine the depth of the situation that along about September of 2008, they were confronted with a whole meltdown of the thing. It's really been a very traumatic time. Paulie, I love talking to you. We got off on things, we get to issues, but one thing we want to make sure we get into, because you can sometimes forget, you have a role in. Right?
Yes, I do.
You have a little piece. You have a website. Why don't you say it now? Let everybody know that. Well, and do it slow.
Everybody. Colia Clark's website.
Okay.
Go to Colia Clark.
Now spell it one letter at a time.
C-O-L-I-A-C-L-A-R-K.
Let's do it again. C-O-L-I-A-C-L-A-R-K. Yay!
.org.
That's the site, and you've got a little clip on there, right?
I have a little clip on there.
We've set
Colia's song that I really want everybody to hear.
Colia's song. Okay.
It's a wonderful man and his children wrote this song to me in about 1996.
Really? Okay.
Up at Albany for my work up in the Albany region.
Good for you. Okay.
And so the song now has taken on new meaning.
All right, good. Okay, in the booth, if you could set it up, Josh and Joe and George and everything, if you could set up, maybe you could just roll that piece if you can get it going. So, here we go. It looks like they got it going now. So let's get that playing and kick that sucker. And there we go.
They did not need money. They had no liquidity crisis. They laughed all the way to the bank. They came because they needed a credit rating. And they left with trillions of dollars of our money, which they invested somewhere. We need to know where they invested with total transparency.
Taught by Martin, human rights, fight the races, stop that governmental race. They really make us sick. A racist politician is a special kind of thing. Expose and attack in any way that you can. Create an opposition, black, white, red, brown, and tan.
That is the taxpayers' money, and therefore we have a right to 50% share on any profit they made from those investments. We are now owners in Wall Street as American people.
Hey, that Chucky shoe, don't get Wall Street no more. Get back the people's money, give it to the poor. What you think you're doing with that Wall Street rebate? Give the money back, Chucky, before it's too late. What about the charter schools? I hear that they're great. The hedge funds are invested for the huge tax rebate. Once the tax break's over, up go the interest rates. Stop Wall Street's education plan before it's too late.
And America's greatest national security is educating her youth. There's no greater risk than an illiterate population to the security of a nation. So what I'm saying to Albany and to the state of New York, that it is time that we invest in America's national treasurer, that we democratize education for all college students, that every college student in the United States be guaranteed at a public institution 4 years of free education, no loans.
From troopers, knock on your door. They'll take back your rights. They want more and more. From Selma to DC, it's always the same. Abuse the unprotected and the poor are to blame.
By democratizing our education and lifting up our college students, and not just those in New York, but those around the country. And I'm going to tell you right now, for sure as I worked with Medgar Evers and Martin King and all of that batch back in the 60s, coming into the early 70s, for those who survived that long, I am willing to go to every molehill, anthill, every toilet, back alley, whatever there is in Washington, including the Senate chambers, to fight on behalf of America's youth. I am willing, as willing now as I was then, to give my life to make sure that there is a democratic education for every child in this country. I don't care where they come from. How do we do it? We need a a tax on war profiteers, a 15% surtax on war profiteers who are profiting from the murder and slaughter of young kids all over this world.
Yes, yeah, we do. It's true. We do need, as part of a big change. That's really good. Who put that together for you?
Well,
the song, I mean.
The brother's named Jay.
Yeah,
I never remember Jay's last name, but
yeah,
he's a fantastic man.
I know.
The children were young kids when they were singing together, and then they decided to write this song for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to a festival one day, and there was all of a sudden a song to Colia. I cried.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, it was so wonderful to know they were so thoughtful. But now they're grown. The children are now grown.
Yeah.
And Jay and the kids work together to do this, to put this together.
Well, is the green powder gathering steam? Is it? Somebody asked me the other day, what the heck is going on? That thing in Delaware was a real amazing for that woman. I forget her name now, who won Tea Party support with Sarah Palin and everything. And what there is there's obvious upset. We have a 10% unemployment rate. Lord Keynes said we're going to be confronted with structural unemployment because the technology.
Detroit has a 35% unemployment rate.
Okay. And no, the thing is,
it's not funny, but it's
always it has been in the past that if it happens, like Henry Ford used to tinker in my grandfather's garage before he started the Ford Motor Company, and people would work on a farm. They would come. There'd be a job. There'd be something for them to do, or there's something new that develops. But what we're being confronted with now is a technological thing where you're going to have massive technologically induced unemployment.
Yes.
Because if you have an algorithm that can do, if you're going to keep a market system, things can happen in the government and so forth that don't pay attention to market signals. But if you have a market system, it displaces 250,000 people, and it can do it with, let's say, algorithms. It can be done. A whole factory can be automated. You don't need people to be the wage slaves that have been dependent upon the economy functioning in the past. And we have a system where all the ownership of the technology, which is increasingly responsible in a ratio with labor, is owned by a tiny class, and the system does not get any ownership to the masses of the people. The people who own the ownership of the stock, they get checks coming into their account every year because they own that stock. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But the people don't. They have to have a wage given to them by the people who own all the assets, and the ownership's not owned. It's not at all democratic. Is that an issue to be addressed, or
we have to address it.
Does the left or the liberal elements of society have to address that and come up with some sort of a system that could, let's say, subsume an outdated system by lifting the whole system on its own petard? That is, you have to call them to question about why is it that the assets, the system is set up to benefit only the few who are already rich, and that's the tendency that's in place.
No. We have to do just a little deeper than that. I agree with you. But we have to go a little deeper. And you know, there have been people who have been talking about this for quite some time. I was in Chicago in '66 with the King campaign. We had a movement called the Union to End Slums movement. And organizing
I know you've been
block by block,
unions,
unions, block. This is why King came to Chicago in '65.
Right.
But he said something in '66 that struck me, and across time I wonder why it has not been embraced by at least the intellectual forces in the nation.
That's what I'm looking at.
And that is that as we enter the age of cybernetics, and we know now that age that he talked about is real, because by 1990, industry died in this country, actually. Industry is dead.
Whatever industry it was shipped overseas.
It displaced millions of people, even prison workers did that. So when we began to look at his statement that America needed to redefine her values, Instead, what is happening in this empty peace, beginning with Reagan, we have had the right-wing forces in this country defining the values of the country, the value for work, or the value for human life. And so we need to begin to ask that intellectual community to step up to the plate, to to come out of the terror. And I know they're terrorized because I worked on college campuses. To come out of that terror.
Now, who's terrorized? Now, tell me.
The intellectuals in this country are terrorized.
Well, the intellectuals are falling down on the job in terms of coming up with an alternative that's viable.
That's right, because they're terrorized. They're scared to death. They have alternatives. Well, people are scared to death to talk about their research.
Well, first thing, they're bought off by tenured positions at universities.
Yes.
They can't say anything with outside the peer review, and if they do
but
say
who's on
anything,
the
they're going to be
university?
knocked
CIA
out.
moved on to SUNY campus at Albany when I was there.
Yeah.
Displaced my stuff from the United Nations. I came in one morning. I used to have a whole table that would be loaded with UN material from all of the UN agencies, whether it was women or children or whether it was scientific. And it would always be on the tables. I came in one morning, somebody put it all on this one table in these neat stacks. Look like a fallen pyramid. Neatly placed on the other table. Neatly on the other table were CIA applications and CIA materials. This was in a small department of Africana Studies. Which had already been colonized and was being taken over.
Okay, but pursue the issue about the intellectuals and the need to
No, we need to redefine our values, and we got to define with the value for work. If we redefine the value for work in this country, we will redefine its economy. Because if human beings can no longer work.
Does that come under the rubric of a living wage?
It's not only the guaranteed annual income, yes.
Guaranteed, and that's like...
So either you provide a man with a living wage, and I did say living wage, not just something to put in your pocket to have to cover the rent, the food, and maybe you can get the baby to the doctor. But we need a living wage. We need a living wage that really allows human beings a space in which to develop their creativity. We don't need an 8-hour work week anymore. Never did, but we don't need it now. We need now to probably be talking a 4 to 6-hour work week, if at the most. That's if we want to employ large numbers of people in the traditional work sector. However, if we abandon that work sector concept and accept that we have come into the age of cybernetics, and we have, and it's beginning to kill us as well, because we have not redefined the value for work in a way that allows the human beings, so you and I, who have grown a little bit older than others, can talk to our children or grandchildren. I'm not unfortunate about it. I love it. But because now I've got 20 grandchildren.
Oh, well.
I got so many great-grandchildren now,
Can you remember all their names? Can you
yes, I do. I remember every single one of their names.
I got friend Willie Stu. Can't remember. There's so many.
Oh, no, you must have more than I. My mother remembered all of hers, and at her death, she had 47 grand, 66 great-grand, and 6 great-great-grand.
Wow. Okay.
And within a year of that, the great-great-grand had tripled. So, but she remembered their names and their birth dates, and I do too. But what I'm saying is that we need to begin to redefine that value, because that value would then mean that maybe folklore and art and music and drama and all of these the people who work in gardens, all this stuff that we see now as non-essential, peripheral to the main economy, becomes the new economy. And human beings will begin to live lives free. We will begin then to develop relationships with the rest of the world, not based on our war machine, not based on my gun's bigger than yours and my capital is bigger than yours, but based on our human needs. So if Africa has something that I need, and I'm not talking about digging in Mother Earth, we must not dig in Mother Earth's belly anymore. We have no reason to be digging in Mother Earth's belly.
You mean what we natural resources? Or?
Digging down, taking out the minerals of the earth. Africa has been exploited for oil, or gold, silver, or diamond, or platinum. No. For what we need, and some of that we probably will need a little of if we're going to run our present technology. But what we need is food. What we need is an open use of land. Land is a powerful resource, but it's a human resource, not the fencing that's happening over the last 600 years. We have fenced and walled everything we can find. The fences must come down. So the barriers must come down. So we must enter the human age. As Dr. King would call it the Christian era. I don't want to call it the Christian era because many people on this planet, in fact most people on this planet are not Christian, that we enter the human age. An age when human beings, and that's the age when you were talking about we'd come to that point where we move beyond the womb. And that is the age we really talk about. It's opening up the human era.
Well, I hear what you're saying and everything, but I was bringing up the issue of Why is the angst that's free-floating in the society now with the economy? They may be facing a double dip, as they say, because the only way they have to get income in the thinking of the system, both the private sector, public sector, the only way you're going to get income to the masses, 95% of the population, is for you to have a job role for them that you can pay them money for. They're only going to jobs, 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 jobs. You get to Washington, it's going to be jobs, 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 and it's not working. And it's historically, structurally not working. And the question is that, so you're getting this Tea Party thing on the right. They may do well in the election in September. Why isn't there an equally vibrant movement or sense from the left?
Because the Democratic Party did not take advantage of an opportunity.
Well,
we had a young man.
No, but the Tea Party is beyond the Republican Party.
No, it's not. The Tea Party, you may say it's beyond. Tea Party, as far as I'm concerned, is corporate sponsored, and it represents the Republican Party. We can say it's beyond, but the truth of the matter, the people they're putting in the office, for the most part,
they're attacking people within the Republican Party and calling
they
it
are, because you must.
So where is the radical critique of the Democratic Party or the Democratic forces?
No, I don't want to just say the Democratic Party. The forces are what you're talking about.
The forces of democracy are
all I'm saying is we had an opportunity. The Democrats had an opportunity, a real opportunity. They went with a carte blanche to change America. They went with a carte blanche.
You mean after 2008?
Yes, of course. That young man was given an opportunity to reorganize our economy to suit human. That man was given an opportunity to end war. That man was given an opportunity to create balance between Wall Street and what we're calling Main Street. And he did just the opposite.
You think so?
Can you show me how he did that?
Well, what was there able to be done? He had to come in and get billions of dollars to save capitalism.
No, he didn't have to do that.
He had to do that or the system would have fallen. They were confronted with a situation that if they didn't have that bill on the signed at the end of the week, 3 pages, at the end of the week, and signed by the president, Mr. Bush, the whole world economy would fall down a rabbit hole and never be heard of again. It was so bad that they had to put up massive amounts of support in order to shore up capitalism one more time like Roosevelt had done, and they had to do all that. It was a terrible mess that they confronted.
We're still in the terrible mess, Hal.
All right, but
are we going to continue to save it? Are we going to continue to bail out?
The problem is not with, in my why has not the liberal forces or the left forces, let's call it that, the intellectual forces, come up with an understanding of an alternative that can be presented to the leadership that is relevant to what the future requires? It's the intellectuals that are falling down.
You mean why hasn't that voice been out? I'm sure on the left that there are the alternatives.
Where are the visionaries that are beyond just the old nostrums? Jobs. What about, how come there's not a thing, hoist the capitalist system? Why don't they distribute ownership of capital to people as a way of getting income to them?
Yeah, why don't we just
why don't we do that?
That's what I'm talking about with the schools. Why not provide schools with land?
Okay, well, okay.
Why not come up with a Marshall Plan? We have all kinds of things that we're doing, Harold, but until there is reality in this nation that corporate America has been feeding the mind.
Yeah, and they control all the media except here.
And they determine, because of the weakness of the American mind, and it is a weak mind.
Okay, well,
that turns on the television and lets somebody tell you what to do.
Well, it's not a weak mind that listens to this program.
The left is not being heard in the corporate media. It's not going to be heard. Democracy in America is the best we have. Hal, I love you.
The problem is there's never enough time. Thanks, Colia, so much. All the best in the election coming up. She's running for the Senate of the United States from the great state of New York. Amen. And God bless you and all the people on the ticket. It's really good. I want that number on my desk by tonight.
You'll get that number, and you got to know that I will be thinking of mass media, public media, when I go to Washington. M&N's on my
Colia Clark, ColiaClark.com is the website.
.org.
Not only for this campaign, but for all your good work, this for advanced human justice so mightily over a long life that's been so very well led. And thank you for all that.
Thank you so much.
See you
for
tomorrow.
having me. Love you.
Please come back. We're coming back tomorrow. Thank you very, very much.